Success and personal growth are not the result of luck. They are forged through deliberate habits that shape your mindset and actions. In this video, you'll discover 10 powerful habits that can rewire your brain, boost focus, build resilience, and unlock your full potential. And each habit is practical, actionable, and designed to create lasting change, helping you think, act, and achieve like a pro. Watch carefully, take notes, and start applying them today to transform your life step by step. Don't forget to subscribe for more life-changing strategies and motivational insights that drive real results. Number 1. Daily thought audits for control. There is a quiet power in noticing the stream of thoughts that runs through the day. Most people live as if thoughts are background noise, accepted, reacted to, and trusted without examination. That surrender hands the reins to habit, impulse, and old stories. The practice described here trains attention into a deliberate instrument, a daily thought audit that turns fleeting impressions into objects of inspection. The result is not denial of feeling, it is mastery of response. This is a practical discipline that produces calm, clarity, and the steady inner authority required to choose actions that matter. Begin with a simple premise borrowed from ancient practice. Impressions arrive, judgment follows. If judgment is automatic and uncontrolled, behavior follows suit. The audit inserts a gap, a deliberate pause where observation replaces reactivity. The morning audit anchors the day. A short midday check recalibrates. The evening review closes the loop. The goal is not to achieve perfect positivity, but to hold thoughts up to the light and ask 3 direct questions. Is this true? Is this useful? Is this mine? These 3 questions create a filter that separates fact from story, utility from rumination, and ownership from inherited narrative. A practical first step is to create a compact morning routine. After waking and before reaching for the phone, sit upright, place one hand on the chest and the other on the belly, and breathe intentionally for 6 full breaths. The physical contact and slow air remind the nervous system that attention can be guided. Take 2 minutes to list the 3 most persistent thoughts already present. Write them down on paper, not on a device. Paper slows the mind and creates a boundary. For each thought, ask, what evidence supports this thought? What evidence contradicts it? How would a wise friend, one who is calm and honest, view this thought? The act of writing and then interrogating transforms a thought from a loud assertion into a hypothesis to be tested. Next, convert insight into action with an implementation intention for the day. For each thought that fails the true useful mind test, craft an if-then plan. If self-doubt arises about a presentation, then repeat a short grounding phrase and consult a 3-point checklist of preparation. If irritation toward a colleague surfaces, then pause for 3 breaths and choose one constructive question to ask. These small scripts are the muscle memory of disciplined response. They shorten the reaction time between thought and action and increase the number of meaningful choices you make. Midday maintenance keeps the practice real. Set a single discrete cue, a cup of water, a calendar chime, or a stretch break, and do a 90-second thought audit. Close the eyes and scan the top of the mind like checking a dashboard. Name the dominant feeling. Name the loudest thought. Label them without argument. Anger, worry, planning. Naming alone reduces intensity because language frames experience. Follow naming with a neutralizing action. 3 slow exhalations, a 30-second walk, or reading aloud 1 sentence of a grounding text. The aim is not to silence thought, but to reallocate attention away from unhelpful spirals and toward appointed projects. A crucial component of any audit is a trigger map. Over several days, note the common events that ignite repetitive or reactive thoughts. Is it social media in the morning, an unread email, an unresolved family conversation? When these triggers are mapped, they can be redesigned, replace the trigger, or alter the response. If social media evokes comparison, create a rule: no feeds before completing the morning audit. If email provokes anxiety, schedule 2 focused email sessions and use the interim time for deep work. Changing the environment around thought reduces the frequency of unhelpful impressions and makes the audit lighter and more effective. The evening audit is a gentle yet rigorous closing practice. Before sleep, take 5 to 10 minutes with a notebook and answer 3 questions. What thought dominated my day, and how did it influence my actions? Which thoughts served me, and which drained me? What 3 small adjustments will change tomorrow's story? This ritual turns experience into intelligence. It trains the mind to look for patterns, to see the same faulty narratives reappearing, and to plan corrective moves. Writing at night also offloads unresolved concerns, decreasing the mind's tendency to churn during sleep. Make the audit concrete with a short, repeatable format. A template might look like this. 1. Describe the thought in 1 sentence. True. Rate its helpfulness. 1.5. 3. Identify evidence for and against. 4. Choose 1 corrective action. 5. Write an if-then reminder for future triggers. This 5-step pattern can be completed in under 5 minutes, and over time rewires the habit of accepting thoughts unexamined. Practical language matters. Replace vague internal commentary with specific descriptions. Instead of "I am a failure," a more accurate and less catastrophic phrasing is "I feel disappointed about the result of Project X." The first formulation claims identity. The second names a feeling tied to a circumstance. That precision reduces the gravitational pull of negative beliefs and opens space for problem solving. Use sensory anchors when possible. Describe the tightness in the throat, the shallow breath, the tension behind the eyes. Sensory detail grounds the audit in bodily reality, making it harder for abstract catastrophizing to dominate. Introduce a thought replacement bank. For common cognitive distortions, catastrophizing, mind reading, black and white thinking, compile short, effective alternatives. For example, catastrophizing becomes "what is the most likely realistic outcome?" Mind reading converts to "what evidence supports my belief about their intention?" Keep these replacements on an index card or as a locked note on the phone. When a familiar pattern appears, draw from the bank and practice speaking the replacement aloud. The voice of correction, calm and clear, crowds out the dramatized inner narrator. There will be resistance. The mind likes familiar narratives, even if they are painful, because familiarity is predictable. Discipline in the form of small, repeated audits builds tolerance for discomfort and rewires the reward system. Reward progress in modest ways. Mark 7 consecutive audits on a calendar and allow a small treat, or share a single insight with a trusted friend. The point is to link the discipline practice with positive feedback, not to chase external validation. Accountability accelerates change. Pair the daily audit with a weekly check-in, where 1 page of your journal is shared with a mentor or accountability partner. The page should include the week's most frequent thoughts, the adjustments attempted, and 1 measurable outcome. Externalizing the practice to another person creates social friction against slipping back into automatic reactivity. Stoic practice teaches that impressions are not commands. Treat the habit of auditing as obedience to a wiser part of the self. When a harsh internal voice speaks, respond with the quiet question, "Is this thought commanding me, or merely commenting?" That distinction restores dignity. Actions are the true currency. Thoughts only gain power when they direct behavior. The discipline is to refuse small, needless concessions. Over time, small refusals accumulate into a transformed default. Include a recovery method for days when the audit fails or reveals raw, overwhelming material. Use a triage approach. Breathe, name, and postpone. Acknowledge the thought without amplifying it, and schedule a short, dedicated time to process it later. If panic or deep sadness surfaces, call a support person or use a grounding exercise, for instance, naming 5 visible objects, 4 sounds, 3 feelings, 2 movements, and 1 breath. This sensory recentering returns the system to baseline so the audit can be useful rather than punitive. Measure progress in frequency and freedom rather than purity. A helpful metric is tracking how often an automatic reaction is replaced by a chosen response. Start with a baseline. How many times per day do unhelpful thoughts derail work, relationships, or mood? After a month of audits, check the number again. Slight reductions indicate meaningful neural change. Celebrate reductions, but focus more on the qualitative shift. Are decisions calmer? Does focus return after interruptions? Is sleep less restless? Finally, integrate gratitude as a stabilizing counterpart. At the end of the nightly audit, write 1 specific thing that happened and one quality in the self that made that moment possible. This is not empty positivity. It is a recognition of agency and resource. Gratitude narrows attention to what is working and counters the mind's tendency to fixate on lack. Daily thought audits do not aim to produce a perfect mind. Their purpose is clearer: to make the mind reliable. A reliable mind notices impressions, tests them, and chooses measured action. A life lived with this practice becomes less turbulent, more intentional, and richer in purpose. The discipline honors reality without being owned by it. Each small audit is a vote for sovereignty over inner life. Repeated, those votes elect a new habit of being quieter, wiser, and fully present in the work that matters. Number 2. Build identity through micro-wins. Identity is not something you are born with fully formed. It is a mosaic created from repeated actions, decisions, and the small victories that accumulate over time. Most people underestimate the quiet power of incremental achievement. They wait for a dramatic transformation to validate their worth or define who they are. But identity does not emerge from grand gestures alone. It emerges in the tiny, consistent behaviors that signal to the mind, body, and environment, "This is who I am." The strategy of building identity through micro-wins is about deliberately stacking these small, meaningful victories to reshape perception, behavior, and ultimately, the trajectory of life. The process begins with redefining success in a way that is immediate, tangible, and repeatable. Large goals can feel abstract and overwhelming. They often create a sense of inadequacy if progress is not immediately visible. Micro-wins, however, provide consistent feedback that reinforces self-efficacy. They are measurable, observable actions that, when repeated, reinforce a new identity. For example, choosing to drink a full glass of water before breakfast each morning is a minor act, yet it reinforces the narrative, "I am someone who prioritizes health." Consistency is the signal, repetition is the teacher, and over time, the mind begins to internalize these signals as core traits rather than optional behavior. A practical approach is to identify the smallest step that aligns with the person you want to become. Instead of aiming to become disciplined, start with committing to one 10-minute focus session each day. Instead of becoming organized, begin by arranging one drawer or one digital folder. The principle is simple: create actions that are too small to fail, but still meaningful enough to produce internal validation. These micro-wins act as scaffolding, supporting increasingly ambitious goals. The brain interprets success, however small, as evidence of competence, and competence is the foundation of identity. The accumulation of micro-wins requires careful planning and deliberate attention. Start with a single category: health, productivity, emotional regulation, or relationships, and define 3 micro-actions in that domain. Track them daily using a simple journal or habit tracker. Recording progress is crucial because it transforms invisible effort into visible evidence. Each checkmark is not just a note of completion, it is a signal to the subconscious that change has happened. Over weeks, the aggregate of these small steps rewires self-perception. What once seemed aspirational now feels familiar and achievable. Micro-wins also serve as a buffer against self-doubt. Often, the mind resists change by invoking narratives of inadequacy. "I am not consistent," or "I never finish what I start." Each small victory challenges these narratives in real time. Completing a 5-minute meditation, sending a planned message of gratitude, or exercising for 10 minutes may feel trivial in isolation, but repeated consistently, they create undeniable proof of capability. The mind begins to accept these patterns as habitual truth, and the story you tell yourself shifts from "I try and fail" to "I follow through consistently." An essential layer of this practice is reflective reinforcement. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to acknowledge every micro-win, however minor it may appear. Writing down what was accomplished, describing the effort involved, and noting the effect on mood or environment amplifies its impact. Reflection is not mere celebration, it is an integration exercise. The mind must see the connection between action and identity. Over time, this reflection strengthens the neural pathways that associate repeated behaviors with a sense of self, transforming temporary achievements into permanent character traits. Micro-wins gain exponential power when paired with intention. Each small act should have a clear purpose tied to the person you aspire to become. For example, if your goal is to be resilient, a micro-win could be intentionally completing a difficult task you've been avoiding. If your goal is generosity, the daily action could be sending a kind note or offering support without expecting acknowledgement. The explicit connection between the action and the desired identity reinforces learning. The brain does not only reward completion, it rewards meaning. When micro-wins carry intention, they strengthen the belief that you are the type of person who consistently acts in alignment with your values. Building identity through micro-wins also relies on the strategic use of environment. Surroundings can either reinforce or undermine small victories. To support a new identity as an organized person, clear clutter from workspaces, place tools in visible locations, and remove distractions that encourage regression. To reinforce a disciplined mindset, schedule daily actions at predictable times and ensure that cues for success are prominent. The environment acts as a silent partner in identity formation, reducing reliance on willpower alone. Micro-wins become easier to achieve when external structures consistently support internal goals. Social context amplifies the effect of micro-wins. Sharing progress with supportive individuals or joining communities aligned with your goals provides validation, accountability, and inspiration. Even the smallest acknowledgement from another person reinforces the belief that these actions are meaningful. Human psychology craves recognition, and when micro-wins are observed and appreciated, they carry more weight in shaping identity. Conversations can shift from abstract declarations of intent to tangible evidence of daily commitment, embedding the new identity more firmly. Resilience is cultivated through micro-wins as well. Life inevitably presents setbacks and failures. The key difference between persistent individuals and those who stagnate is the presence of a foundation built on small, reliable achievements. When larger challenges arise, micro-wins provide a reservoir of evidence that success is possible. The mind can draw on the memory of consistent effort, reminding itself that progress is not all or nothing. Each minor victory becomes a stepping stone, reducing the emotional impact of failure and accelerating recovery. Micro-wins also provide clarity in decision-making. When identity is anchored in small, repeated behaviors, choices become easier and less fraught with doubt. If you see yourself as someone who respects time, the decision to start a project immediately, rather than procrastinate, aligns naturally with self-perception. If you identify as someone who values learning, reading for 15 minutes daily becomes non-negotiable. The cumulative effect of micro-wins is the creation of a default self-concept that simplifies the mental calculus of everyday decisions, reducing wasted energy and improving consistency. To make the process sustainable, it is important to embrace flexibility and iteration. Not every micro-win will feel inspiring, and some may require adjustment. Adaptation is not failure, it is refinement. Periodically review which small actions are reinforcing the desired identity and which are misaligned or ineffective. Replace or modify practices to ensure that every action contributes to the construction of the person you intend to be. This dynamic approach prevents stagnation and keeps the system robust, responsive, and growth. Over time, micro-wins compound in ways that are profound and often unnoticed. Daily improvements, small acts of courage, consistent self-care, and incremental learning accumulate, producing a self-image that is stronger, more capable, and more aligned with values. Eventually, identity and action converge. The person you are thinking about becoming becomes the person you automatically demonstrate through behavior. The inner narrative of inadequacy, hesitation, or doubt loses authority because repeated evidence now supports a different truth. This is who you are. The philosophy behind micro-wins is rooted in the understanding that identity is earned in increments, not decreed by desire alone. It requires patience, vigilance, and disciplined attention to small details. While the world celebrates dramatic transformations, the subtle, persistent work of stacking small victories quietly rewires the brain, reshapes self-perception, and produces enduring results. Success is no longer dependent on extraordinary events, but becomes an extension of consistent, thoughtful daily behavior. The practice of building identity through micro-wins transforms more than daily habits. It transforms self-belief, resilience, and agency. Each completed action reinforces the internal statement, I am capable, consistent, and deliberate. Over months and years, this repetition creates a new baseline for thought and behavior. What once required effort becomes instinctual. The mind, trained by repeated success, begins to default to the new identity. Confidence becomes rooted not in external validation but in lived experience. The discipline of micro-wins also nurtures a sense of ownership. Every victory, no matter how small, is a declaration that change is possible, that growth is not abstract, but tangible, and that identity is constructed through conscious, persistent effort. Each completed action becomes a block in the architecture of selfhood. Over time, the accumulation of these blocks produces a resilient, self-directed character capable of facing challenges, sustaining effort, and achieving goals that once seemed distant or impossible. By committing to micro-wins, life is experienced in layers of accomplishment, feedback, and self-definition. Small successes become habits. Habits become character. Character becomes destiny. The practice eliminates reliance on chance or external circumstances, because identity is rooted in observable, repeatable behaviors. It creates autonomy, reinforces purpose, and cultivates a profound sense of agency. Each day presents opportunities for small victories. Each victory builds confidence, and the collection of these moments shapes an individual who is powerful, intentional, and fully in command of their life. The journey of building identity through micro-wins is continuous. There is no ultimate endpoint. Identity evolves as the accumulation of consistent actions grows. The key is to start small, track relentlessly, reflect deeply, and act deliberately. Every minor achievement is a brick, every reflection a mortar, and over time, a solid structure of self emerges. By embracing this approach, the mind learns that identity is not a distant prize, but a living, actionable process. The discipline of micro-wins makes success inevitable, not because it guarantees perfection, but because it transforms the way a person inhabits every moment, every choice, and every action, creating a life aligned with vision, values, and potential. Number 3. Replace reaction with intentional response. Life is a series of stimuli, and the way most people navigate these stimuli is through automatic reactions. From minor frustrations to complex challenges, the default mode is to respond impulsively, guided by habit, emotion, or ingrained narrative. This approach often leads to regret, wasted energy, and patterns that repeat endlessly without producing meaningful outcomes. Replacing reaction with intentional response is a discipline of conscious choice. It is the difference between being swept along by circumstance and acting with clarity, purpose, and measured effectiveness. This practice transforms daily life by shifting control from external events to internal mastery. The foundation of intentional response begins with awareness. Without noticing impulses as they arise, there is no opportunity to intervene. Awareness is not a passive observation. It is an active skill cultivated through mindfulness of body, mind, and environment. The first step is to recognize the initial signs of a reaction: a tightening in the chest, a surge of heat, a racing thought, a contraction in posture. These physiological and mental cues signal that a reaction is being prepared. By observing these signals, the mind inserts a pause, a window where choice replaces habit. Once awareness is established, the next step is creating a deliberate space between stimulus and response. Even a few seconds of pause can dramatically alter the trajectory of behavior. This pause is not empty. It is filled with assessment, perspective, and alignment with long-term goals. During the pause, one can ask, what is the desired outcome in this situation? What will produce the most constructive result, not just the most immediate relief? How would a person I admire respond under similar circumstances? This reflective buffer transforms the initial surge of emotion into a measured response, grounded in reason rather than instinct. Practical methods reinforce this pause. Controlled breathing is one of the simplest and most effective tools. A conscious inhalation through the nose, followed by a slow exhale, engages the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing impulsivity and sharpening focus. Another method is the mental labeling of emotion. Silently naming the feeling, anger, frustration, anxiety, creates separation between the self and the impulse. Labeling neutralizes the reactive charge, allowing the mind to treat the emotion as information rather than a command. Small physical gestures, such as grounding through the feet or pressing fingertips together, reinforce presence and control. Intentional responses are guided by values and objectives, not by fleeting impulses. To cultivate this, it is necessary to define guiding principles in advance. Principles like integrity, patience, empathy, or efficiency act as a compass when emotions surge. For example, when faced with criticism, a principle of patience might encourage listening and clarifying questions rather than immediate defensiveness. When deadlines are threatened, a principle of efficiency may prompt structured prioritization instead of frantic multitasking. Principles serve as internal infrastructure that supports deliberate action and prevents the chaos of reactive. Another important element is reframing perception. Reactions often arise because events are interpreted as personal attacks, threats, or injustices. Reframing involves stepping back and observing the situation with curiosity, rather than judgment. Consider that most occurrences are neutral until meaning is assigned. By consciously choosing an interpretation aligned with growth and effectiveness, one can neutralize reactive impulses before they dictate behavior. For instance, a delayed response from a colleague may trigger irritation, but if reframed as a scheduling conflict rather than intentional neglect, the emotional intensity diminishes and a constructive solution becomes possible. Intentional response also requires preparation for high-stakes situations. Anticipate triggers that historically provoke strong reactions and plan responses in advance. This is not a rigid script, but a mental rehearsal of possible scenarios and considered actions. Visualization strengthens neural pathways associated with calm, rational decision-making. When the real moment arrives, the mind and body are already accustomed to measured action, reducing the likelihood of impulsive behavior. This preparation is particularly effective for recurring conflicts, high-pressure negotiations, or stressful family dynamics. Self-monitoring and reflection reinforce the practice. At the end of each day, review instances where reactions occurred versus where intentional responses were successfully implemented. Analyze the triggers, the chosen responses, and the outcomes. This reflection transforms experience into intelligence, making future decisions more fluid and precise. Journaling or brief notes can serve as a mirror to track progress, revealing patterns of improvement and areas requiring greater attention. This iterative learning ensures that the shift from reaction to response is not occasional but progressively consistent. Emotional resilience grows in tandem with intentional response. By repeatedly choosing action aligned with purpose, rather than instinct, the mind strengthens the ability to tolerate discomfort without collapsing into automatic behavior. A confrontation that would previously trigger anger can be met with calm inquiry. A sudden critique that would provoke defensiveness can be addressed with composure and strategic thinking. Resilience is not absence of emotion. It is mastery over the direction of energy. Each intentional response reinforces the belief that challenges are navigable and that self-command is reliable. Language shapes both thought and action. Replace reactive phrases with statements that open choice rather than close it. Instead of saying, "I can't deal with this," practice, "How can I best address this?" Instead of internalizing blame as "they are making me angry," shift to "I notice anger. I choose my response." Word structure perception. By framing experiences in terms of options and agency, intentional response becomes more natural and habitual. Small, repeated practices compound. Begin with minor, everyday scenarios. A slow reply to an email that initially triggers irritation, a calm acknowledgement of a colleague's disagreement, or pausing before reacting to traffic frustration. Each successful application strengthens neural pathways and builds confidence in the ability to remain composed. Over time, even high-stress situations elicit measured responses rather than uncontrolled reaction. The brain learns that deliberate action yields better outcomes, and the body internalizes a calm baseline that supports clear thinking. Accountability and social reinforcement enhance skill acquisition. Discussing experiences with trusted individuals or mentors can provide external perspective and validation, Sharing challenges and strategies allows reflection beyond the confines of internal reasoning. Hearing alternative approaches or affirmations of progress encourages refinement and reinforces commitment. Social accountability transforms abstract intentions into lived, observable patterns, increasing both discipline and motivation. The transformation from reaction to intentional response is cumulative. Each pause, each deliberate choice, and each reflection reinforces self-trust. Over weeks and months, the mind shifts from automatic patterns to proactive engagement with life. Challenges become opportunities to practice and demonstrate agency. Relationships improve because responses are measured, reducing conflict escalation. Professional effectiveness grows because decisions are deliberate and informed. Health and emotional well-being benefit from reduced stress and more coherent decision-making. Intentional response is a practice of sovereignty over oneself. It demands patience, vigilance, and continuous refinement, yet rewards with stability, clarity, and influence over circumstances. The discipline is to observe without judgment, pause with awareness, and act with alignment to principles and goals. Each instance of deliberate choice reinforces the inner architecture of calm authority, replacing reactive chaos with purposeful, productive engagement. Failures will occur, and reactions will sometimes bypass conscious intention. This is natural and part of the learning process. The key is not perfection, but persistence. Each setback is an opportunity to analyze, adjust, and recommit. Observing failure without self-condemnation and returning to the practice strengthens resilience and deepens mastery. Over time, the proportion of intentional responses increases, making deliberate action the default and reactive impulses rare anomalies rather than the norm. Ultimately, the shift from reaction to intentional response is transformative because it changes the relationship with reality. External events remain unpredictable and challenging, but the mind gains a reliable anchor. By consistently practicing observation, pausing, reframing, and acting with purpose, one cultivates freedom from the tyranny of impulse. Life becomes less chaotic and more coherent, and each decision reflects conscious alignment with values, objectives, and long-term vision. Intentional response is not a technique to suppress life's intensity, but a method to engage fully and wisely. It empowers individuals to navigate uncertainty, manage relationships, and pursue goals with clarity and confidence. By replacing reaction with intentional response, every interaction, challenge, and decision becomes an opportunity to reinforce character, demonstrate self-mastery, and shape a life guided by deliberate choice rather than unexamined habit. Mastery emerges in the consistent application of these principles, transforming the ordinary into a domain of control, insight, and purposeful action. Number 4. Design environments that force growth. Growth does not happen by accident. It is not a product of wishing or hoping, but of deliberate conditions that compel development. Most people struggle because their surroundings are designed for comfort, distraction, or ease, rather than challenge, discipline, and expansion. Designing environments that force growth is a principle that transforms potential into reality by aligning the external world with internal objectives. The spaces we inhabit, the tools we keep within reach, the people we interact with, and even the time slots we occupy daily can either reinforce stagnation or cultivate improvement. The environment, properly structured, becomes a silent partner in the pursuit of excellence. The first step in this practice is clarity about the direction of growth desired. Without a clear destination, environmental changes are random and ineffective. Determine the competencies, habits, or traits to develop. Is the focus mental resilience, physical fitness, productivity, creativity, or emotional mastery? Identifying the target allows for intentional placement of cues, supports, and constraints that encourage progress. Growth is rarely spontaneous. It requires nudges and friction that guide behavior toward the desired outcome. Once clarity exists, the environment can be engineered to reduce resistance, increase efficiency, and amplify deliberate effort. One of the most powerful tools for environmental design is the strategic placement of stimuli. Human behavior is highly responsive to visual, auditory, and tactile cues. If the goal is to read more, books should be visible, easily accessible, and integrated into areas where downtime occurs. If physical fitness is a priority, exercise equipment should be positioned in a location that encourages daily use, not hidden in storage. The mind responds to reminders embedded in the physical space, and repeated exposure creates habitual engagement. Subtle cues, when aligned with intention, function as gentle yet persistent forces that shape action without relying on constant willpower. Equally important is the removal of obstacles to progress. Clutter, distractions, and tempting indulgences undermine growth. For instance, keeping social media notifications active or placing unhealthy snacks within easy reach can sabotage health and focus goals. The principle is simple: reduce friction for desired actions and increase friction for counterproductive behaviors. A workspace free of unnecessary items, a phone kept in another room during deep work, or a kitchen stocked with nourishing options ensures that energy is directed toward improvement rather than mindless drift. The environment should act as a filter, guiding attention toward opportunity and away from regression. Time is a critical dimension of environmental design. Growth often fails because daily schedules are reactive and fragmented. Structuring time around priority activities enforces progress. Assign specific periods for focused work, exercise, reflection, or skill practice. Treat these blocks as non-negotiable appointments with oneself. The temporal environment, the deliberate allocation of hours and minutes, creates boundaries that naturally encourage the behaviors necessary for growth. Over time, consistency converts these periods into automatic routines, reinforcing identity and capability without the need for constant deliberation. The people in an environment exert a profound influence on growth. Human nature is social, and interaction patterns shape beliefs, habits, and attitudes. Surround yourself with individuals who challenge, inspire, and exemplify the traits you wish to cultivate. Seek accountability partners, mentors, or peers who provide feedback, support, and a model of excellence. Conversely, limit exposure to those who drain energy, encourage complacency, or reinforce limiting narratives. The social dimension of environmental design is powerful because people internalize behaviors, language, and attitudes from those they spend time with, often unconsciously. Strategic selection of company accelerates development and reinforces desired practice. Environmental design is not limited to physical or social space. It includes the digital realm. Technology can either facilitate progress or distract endlessly. Organize digital environments to support growth. Disable notifications. Streamline apps to essential tools. Curate content that educates or inspires. And block time-consuming diversions. Information is a resource, but unstructured consumption leads to mental clutter and wasted energy. By structuring digital surroundings, the mind experiences fewer interruptions and gains greater bandwidth for meaningful engagement. Digital hygiene is as important as physical and social environmental consideration. Friction and challenge are essential components of an environment designed for growth. Comfort and ease rarely produce transformation. Introducing controlled difficulty ensures adaptation and skill development. For instance, placing a slightly heavier weight on a training regimen, increasing the complexity of a professional project, or setting higher standards for daily work fosters progress. Growth occurs at the edge of current capability. Environments that are too easy encourage stagnation, while environments that are impossibly difficult induce frustration. Calibrating challenge creates a zone where learning, resilience, and mastery intersect. Reinforcement mechanisms embedded in the environment increase the likelihood of sustained effort. Visual progress trackers, checklists, or performance metrics make achievements tangible and provide immediate feedback. A whiteboard with weekly targets, a journal noting incremental improvements, or a visible tally of habits completed reinforces commitment. Human psychology responds strongly to visible indicators of progress. They serve as reminders, motivators, and evidence that small, consistent actions accumulate into meaningful change. Without reinforcement, even well-designed environments can lose efficacy as the novelty of structure fades. Intentional variability in the environment supports creativity and prevents rigidity. While structure is essential, monotony can stifle engagement and limit adaptive capacity. Introduce novel challenges. Rotate stimuli or alter routines periodically to provoke problem-solving and flexibility. For example, rearranging a workspace to encourage different movement patterns, experimenting with new skill-building exercises, or varying learning materials maintains attention and maximizes growth potential. Dynamic environments cultivate adaptability while still orienting behavior toward desired outcomes. Mindset and perception interact intimately with environmental design. Awareness of surroundings amplifies their influence. Observe how specific cues, arrangements, and interactions affect behavior, emotion, and thought patterns. Reflect on what elements consistently produce desired outcomes and which detract from performance. This conscious observation allows iterative refinement of the environment. Design is never static. It evolves as needs, goals, and challenges shift. Regular evaluation ensures that external conditions remain aligned with internal ambitions, creating a feedback loop where environment, action, and self-perception reinforce each other. Deliberate exposure to high standards and aspirational models is another essential strategy. Seek environments where excellence is the norm, not the exception. Places where skill, discipline, and achievement are visible create implicit benchmarks for performance. Whether through professional communities, educational settings, or mentorship opportunities, immersion in high-performing contexts accelerates growth by setting expectations, highlighting gaps, and demonstrating pathways to mastery. The mind naturally adapts to these reference points, internalizing behaviors and attitudes through observation and interaction. Resilience and accountability flourish in intentionally designed spaces. When growth is non-negotiable, failure and feedback are treated as tools rather than setbacks. Environments that provide clear standards, immediate consequences, and support for recovery encourage persistence. Physical cues like dedicated study areas, social contracts with peers, or structured routines for skill practice create an ecosystem where accountability is embedded, not externalized. This reduces reliance on willpower alone and ensures that development continues even when motivation fluctuates. Time horizons in the environment also shape outcomes. Immediate rewards often override long-term benefits, but environmental design can reverse this tendency. Place reminders of long-term objectives in visible locations. Use systems that track cumulative progress, and structure sequences that link present effort to future gain. This alignment ensures that daily actions contribute meaningfully larger ambitions. Environments, when aligned with long-term vision, act as persistent guides that prevent drift and encourage consistency. In sum, growth emerges from deliberate interaction with the environment. Every object, schedule, social contact, digital tool, and space can either inhibit or amplify development. By consciously arranging surroundings to encourage challenge, support habits, provide feedback, and reduce friction, individuals create conditions where excellence becomes the path of least resistance. Over time, external design interacts with internal discipline, reinforcing skill, resilience, focus, and character. Environments do not merely support growth, they compel it, making transformation inevitable for those who commit to crafting spaces aligned with ambition, purpose, and deliberate progress. The practice requires observation, iteration, and intentionality, but the payoff is profound. A life where action, habit, and identity are shaped by structures designed to elevate every day, every choice, and every effort toward the fullest expression of potential. Number 5. Train focus like a muscle. Focus is not an innate talent reserved for a few. It is a skill that grows stronger through deliberate and consistent effort. Just like a muscle, it can atrophy when neglected, but it can also become extraordinary when trained with precision and persistence. In a world flooded with distractions, the ability to sustain attention on what matters is the single most powerful leverage anyone can develop. Strengthening focus transforms how you think, act, and experience life. It is the foundation of productivity, creativity, and resilience, and it requires disciplined practice that challenges the mind while providing measurable progress. The first principle in training focus is recognizing that attention is a finite resource. Each day, countless stimuli compete for your awareness: notifications, conversations, environmental noise, and internal chatter. The brain naturally gravitates toward novelty and distraction because it is wired for survival in uncertain environments. Recognizing this vulnerability allows intentional design of conditions that conserve focus for priority activities. Just as a bodybuilder isolates muscles to build strength, the mind requires periods of unbroken attention on a chosen task to expand capacity. Intentional focus is cultivated when distractions are minimized and attention is directed purposefully. Structured practice is essential. Begin by setting aside dedicated blocks of time for focused effort, free from interruption. Start small, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes, and gradually extend these sessions. During each session, eliminate all non-essential stimuli. Phones silenced, notifications off, workspace care. The first few sessions will feel unnatural. The mind will wander. This is expected. Every moment the mind is gently returned to the task is a repetition that strengthens focus. Success is measured not by perfection, but by the frequency with which attention is redirected after distraction. Progressive overload, borrowed from physical training, applies to focus as well. Once short intervals become manageable, increase complexity or duration. Introduce tasks that demand sustained cognitive effort or problem solving. This intentional challenge expands the capacity to maintain attention under pressure. Just as lifting heavier weights gradually grows muscle fibers, incrementally extending focus sessions improves neural endurance. The brain adapts to increasing demands, reinforcing pathways that support sustained attention, reducing susceptibility to fatigue and distraction. Mindfulness is a complementary tool in this training. The practice of observing thoughts without judgment enhances awareness of attention shifts. When the mind wanders, recognizing the drift without self-criticism allows deliberate redirection to the present task. Breathing techniques, body scans, or sensory anchoring exercises can heighten awareness and deepen concentration. Mindfulness does not directly force attention, but cultivates the control needed to manage it. It strengthens the neurological muscles responsible for maintaining focus and improves the ability to recover from interruptions gracefully. Environmental control accelerates development. Surroundings either support or undermine attention. A workspace cluttered with unrelated objects, a phone buzzing constantly, or background noise can erode the ability to concentrate. Conversely, a minimal, organized space that signals purpose encourages sustained effort. Light, temperature, and ergonomics affect comfort and endurance. The environment should be treated as part of the training apparatus, structured to reduce unnecessary cognitive load and enable full engagement with the intended task. Over time, repeated association between environment and focus strengthens the habit reflexively. Goal setting amplifies effectiveness. Clear, specific objectives provide a target for sustained attention. General intentions like work on my project lack specificity and diffuse focus. Define exactly what constitutes success for each session: a completed report, solving a particular problem, or drafting a set number of ideas. Goals create a framework that organizes attention, making the mind less prone to wander. They also allow measurement of progress, reinforcing the neural patterns associated with effective concentration. Without measurable objectives, practice remains scattered and gains are diminished. The use of deliberate breaks enhances endurance rather than diminishes it. Just as muscles require rest to repair and grow, the mind benefits from intervals of recovery. Techniques such as the Pomodoro method, 25 minutes of concentrated work followed by a short pause, optimize cognitive performance and prevent burnout. During breaks, engage in activities that restore mental energy, such as light movement, hydration, or brief exposure to nature. Structured rest sustains attention over longer periods, ensuring that training is cumulative rather than exhausting. Cognitive variety is another mechanism for growth. Training focus does not mean repetition of a single task indefinitely. It involves practicing attention under varied conditions. Switch between analytical tasks, creative work, and strategic thinking to challenge different neural pathways. Complex tasks that require planning, synthesis, or problem-solving force the mind to maintain engagement, enhancing the flexibility and endurance of focus. Variety ensures that attention becomes robust and transferable across context rather than narrowly specialized. Self-monitoring is a critical component of disciplined training. Regularly review attention performance. How often was focus maintained? How frequently did distraction occur? And which conditions facilitated or hindered concentration? Journaling these observations allows fine-tuning of strategies, identification of triggers, and reinforcement of successful techniques. The act of reflection strengthens metacognition, the ability to observe one's own mental processes, which is essential for long-term improvement. Awareness of progress and patterns creates a feedback loop that continually refines the capacity to focus. Intentional exposure to challenging stimuli builds resilience. Situations that tempt distraction, such as crowded environments or multitasking scenarios, can be used as controlled practice. By deliberately engaging under these conditions and returning attention repeatedly to the task, the mind becomes accustomed to resisting disruption. Like training under resistance in the gym, repeated exposure to challenging conditions strengthens the mental mechanisms responsible for concentration. Over time, focus becomes a default state, less vulnerable to external noise and internal agitation. Visualization techniques enhance readiness and engagement. Before starting a focus session, imagine maintaining unwavering attention through potential challenges. Picture distractions arising and the mind returning immediately to the task. Visual rehearsal primes neural pathways, reinforcing both intention and the experience of success. Mental imagery is a powerful tool because it creates anticipation, reduces anxiety about task difficulty, and strengthens commitment to sustained effort. Combining visualization with actual practice accelerates the development of cognitive endurance. Nutrition's sleep and physical activity directly influence attention. The brain requires adequate fuel, rest, and movement to sustain prolonged focus. Blood sugar stability, hydration, and quality sleep optimize neural function. Regular exercise enhances blood flow, neuroplasticity, and overall cognitive performance. Treating the body as an integral part of focus training magnifies results, ensuring that mental effort is supported by physical resilience. Neglecting these elements undermines even the most disciplined practice. Motivation alone is unreliable. Disciplined habit structures the practice. Creating cues, rituals, and routines transforms attention into a habitual response rather than a fleeting effort. Starting each session with the same preparatory steps, organizing the workspace, reviewing goals, setting a timer conditions the mind to enter a state of readiness. The environment, paired with rituals, signals the brain to shift into concentrated work, making focus less dependent on fluctuating willpower and more consistent over time. Long-term progress emerges through consistent repetition. Daily practice, even if incremental, strengthens neural networks, improves attention span, and increases the ability to filter irrelevant information. The accumulation of these small, deliberate sessions transforms cognitive endurance. Focus becomes not a temporary state, but a habitual baseline. The mind, trained like a well-conditioned muscle, operates with precision, clarity, and sustained engagement, producing results far beyond initial effort. Ultimately, training focus like a muscle transforms not just productivity, but the experience of life itself. Each task completed with deliberate attention builds confidence, competence, and clarity. Complex problems are approached with composure, distractions are resisted with ease, and goals are pursued with intentionality rather than reaction. Focus becomes a superpower, shaping identity, performance, and personal growth. The disciplined cultivation of attention creates a life where every effort counts, every action aligns with purpose, and the mind moves with strength, precision, and unwavering determination toward meaningful achievement. Number 6, eliminate negative inputs completely. The mind is like fertile soil, and what it absorbs determines the growth that takes root. Negative inputs, whether words, images, conversations, or habits, act like toxins, seeding doubt, fear, and stagnation. Eliminating these inputs is not merely about avoiding discomfort. It is about creating a landscape where clarity, resilience, and purpose can flourish. Every thought, every piece of media, every interaction contributes to the ecosystem of the mind. Exposure to negativity chips away at confidence, clouds judgment and conditions reaction rather than intentional action. To cultivate a life of growth and mastery, it is essential to take decisive control over what enters the mind. The first step is awareness of what constitutes a negative input. This goes beyond obvious sources like gossip, sensationalist media, or hostile interactions. It includes subtle forms, internalized criticisms, repetitive worry, comparisons, and persistent doubts. The mind constantly processes both external and internal stimuli, and if these signals are predominantly negative, they distort perception and erode energy. Cataloging sources of mental and emotional erosion is critical. Keep a record for a few days. Note moments when thoughts or feelings became heavy, distracted, or disempowered, and identify the triggers. Understanding the pattern creates clarity on what must be eliminated or replaced. Once identified, negative inputs must be systematically removed or minimized. Physical, digital, and social environments are all contributors. Media consumption is a primary vector. News cycles, social media feeds, and entertainment often amplify fear, outrage, and envy. Commit to curating content rigorously. Unfollow accounts that promote judgment, anxiety, or trivial drama. Limit exposure to news that is sensational rather than informative. Curate a selection of content that educates, inspires, or elevates. By controlling the inflow of information, the mind experiences reduced stress and gains space for focus, creativity, and thoughtful decision-making. Social inputs require similar discernment. Relationships profoundly influence thought patterns and behavior. Interactions with chronically negative or unsupportive individuals can drain energy and reinforce limiting beliefs. It is not about rejecting people unkindly, but about establishing boundaries that protect mental and emotional equilibrium. Limit time with those who consistently undermine, criticize without purpose, or reinforce fear-based thinking. Surround yourself with individuals who exemplify integrity, curiosity, growth, and resilience. Positive social inputs reinforce self-belief and encourage behaviors aligned with long-term objectives. Associations shape identity as strongly as habits, and careful selection strengthens the foundation of a constructive life. Internal dialogue is often overlooked, but is among the most pervasive sources of negativity. The way one speaks to oneself sets the tone for perception and action. Replace harsh judgment with neutral, observant language. When self-criticism arises, acknowledge it without reinforcement, then redirect attention to solutions or constructive planning. For example, instead of repeating, "I always fail at this," practice, "I am noticing challenges and identifying ways to improve." Words internalized repeatedly form neural pathways that shape emotional response. Controlling internal dialogue is as essential as curating external influence. Environment design extends to daily routines. Habits and repeated behaviors dictate exposure to positive or negative stimuli. Analyze the sequence of actions throughout the day and identify where negative inputs occur, even subtle. A habit of checking notifications immediately upon waking can flood the mind with unnecessary stress. Replace routines with rituals that cultivate clarity. A brief reflection, intentional breathing, journaling, or reading content aligned with growth. Consistent reinforcement of positive patterns gradually diminishes susceptibility to external negativity, creating a buffer of calm and focus. Physical surroundings also impact mental state. Spaces cluttered with distractions or reminders of unresolved stress can continuously feed low-level negativity. Organize living and working areas to reflect purpose, order, and tranquility. A well-arranged environment signals the brain that the space is meant for constructive activity, reducing cognitive friction and emotional drain. Clean, intentional spaces function as subtle but persistent positive inputs, allowing energy to be channeled toward achievement rather than scattered by chaos. Digital hygiene is crucial in eliminating negative inputs. Constant notifications, algorithmic feeds designed to capture attention, and engagement with superficial interactions can reinforce worry, impatience, and comparison. Implement strict boundaries. Mute notifications, schedule periods of offline activity, and limit the number of applications vying for attention. Curate online spaces to highlight learning, collaboration, and meaningful content. Technology should serve growth rather than dictate emotional state. Thoughtful digital curation provides freedom from reactive patterns and preserves cognitive bandwidth for purpose-driven action. Intentional replacement is an essential component. Eliminating negative inputs without offering positive alternatives leaves the mind empty, prone to relapsing into distraction or unhelpful rumination. Introduce content, activities, and interactions that inspire, challenge, or inform. Read books that expand perspective, engage in discussions that encourage problem-solving, or practice skills that reinforce competence and confidence. Positive inputs act as scaffolding, gradually reshaping thought patterns and emotional responses. They provide the raw material for creativity, insight, and deliberate action. Boundaries with external demands are part of the practice. Negative inputs often masquerade as obligations, toxic emails, unproductive meetings, or societal pressures that invoke fear or comparison. Learn to say no without guilt to engagements that do not align with values or objectives. Guard time and attention as precious resources. Each refusal to engage with unnecessary negativity preserves energy for meaningful pursuits, reinforcing autonomy and self-respect. Freedom is not just liberation from distraction, but intentional allocation of attention to what fosters growth. Consistency is the engine of transformation. Eliminating negative inputs is not a one-time event. It is a continual process of observation, adjustment, and reinforcement. Periodically audit the information, interactions, and habits that enter light. Identify new sources of negativity as they arise, and address them decisively. Reflection strengthens awareness and allows adaptation. The practice is proactive rather than reactive, ensuring that negativity does not accumulate unnoticed and erode momentum toward goals. Emotional resilience grows alongside this discipline. When negative inputs are removed or minimized, the mind gains clarity, stability, and focus. Stress levels decrease, decision-making improves, and mental energy becomes available for deliberate, value-driven action. Challenges still occur, but with a fortified cognitive and emotional environment, responses become measured rather than reactive. The mind is no longer subject to constant emotional turbulence, but instead operates from a place of observation, purpose, and control. Over time, the cumulative effect of eliminating negative inputs manifests in profound behavioral and perceptual shifts. The mind becomes attuned to constructive patterns, and habits of thought that once reinforced anxiety, distraction, or self-doubt fade. Clarity of intention increases, priorities sharpen, and energy is directed toward activities that produce measurable progress. The mental landscape, cleansed of unnecessary negativity, becomes fertile ground for creativity, learning, and achievement. The individual is no longer shaped by external chaos, but guided by internal purpose and intentional choices. Eliminating negative inputs is not about avoiding reality or isolating oneself from challenges. It is about selecting what deserves attention and energy, maintaining focus on what supports growth rather than reinforcing fear, doubt, or stagnation. It is an active process of cultivation, choosing stimuli that educate, inspire, and empower, while discarding those that drain, distort, or distract. The discipline transforms both experience and capability, enabling consistent progress, sharper judgment, and enhanced emotional intelligence. Ultimately, a life free from unnecessary negative inputs creates space for transformation. Decisions are guided by clarity rather than confusion. Actions emerge from competence rather than reaction, and daily energy is harnessed for productive and meaningful endeavors. By consciously controlling what enters the mind, the individual gains sovereignty over thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. The mind becomes a refined instrument, capable of deliberate action, sustained focus, and deep engagement with life's challenges and opportunities. This practice lays the foundation for resilience, mastery, and the intentional creation of a life aligned with values, goals, and highest potential. Number 7. Practice gratitude to rewire perspective. Gratitude is more than a fleeting emotion. It is a deliberate practice that reshapes perception, rewires thought patterns, and transforms the lens through which life is experienced. Most people navigate their days focused on what is missing, what has gone wrong, or what is unfair, and this perspective reinforces anxiety, frustration, and stagnation. Practicing gratitude systematically redirects attention toward what is present, meaningful, and empowering. It is a tool that rewrites the mind's habitual pathways, strengthening resilience, sharpening clarity, and enhancing the ability to act from a grounded, purposeful place. The process begins with conscious awareness. Gratitude requires noticing the elements of life that contribute to growth, comfort, and opportunity. This does not mean ignoring challenges or denying difficulties. It means balancing recognition of hardship with acknowledgement of the resources, strengths, and support systems available. Start by observing the small, often overlooked details: the warmth of sunlight on skin, a smile exchanged with a stranger, a task completed with efficiency, or a lesson learned through struggle. These seemingly minor observations, when accumulated, shift baseline perception from scarcity and complaint to abundance and possibility. Writing is a powerful mechanism to solidify gratitude. Maintaining a daily journal allows experiences to move from fleeting impressions to deliberate reflections. Each day, record 3 to 5 specific elements for which you are grateful. Precision matters. Instead of writing, "I am grateful for my family," note, "I am grateful that my sibling called me today to share encouragement and I felt supported and connected." Concrete observations engage the mind, deepen emotional resonance, and create lasting neural association. Over time, the act of recording gratitude reinforces the brain's ability to notice opportunities, support, and beauty in everyday life. The practice of gratitude expands when paired with intention. Take moments to consciously reflect on why specific elements are valuable. Ask, "How did this affect me? What did I learn? How did it support my growth?" This depth of reflection transforms gratitude from a surface acknowledgement into a cognitive and emotional process that rewires thinking. The brain begins to automatically scan for contributing factors to well-being and success, rather than threats, scarcity, or failure. Patterns of attention shift from problems to solutions, obstacles to opportunities, and fear to appreciation. Gratitude also functions as a recalibration tool during adversity. Life inevitably presents challenges, setbacks, and conflicts. In these moments, focusing on what remains intact, what resources exist, or what lessons are emerging allows the mind to anchor in possibility rather than despair. Even amidst difficulty, small observations, such as a reliable friend, a temporary respite, or a physical ability, serve as stabilizers that reduce emotional turbulence. This reframing builds resilience, because the mind is conditioned to search for constructive elements rather than defaulting to panic or frustration. Social expression amplifies the effects of gratitude. Sharing acknowledgement with others not only strengthens connections, but also reinforces internal patterns of recognition. Express thanks through conversation, notes, or gestures. A simple, specific compliment or recognition of effort conveys attention and care while simultaneously reinforcing your own awareness of positive dynamics. Gratitude expressed outwardly magnifies its internal impact, creating a feedback loop that strengthens relationships, cultivates empathy, and fosters trust. The brain integrates these interactions as proof that positive engagement is meaningful and valuable. Physical embodiment enhances the practice. Gratitude can be reinforced through posture, breathing, and sensory focus. When acknowledging something to be grateful for, pause, breathe deeply, and allow the body to resonate with the acknowledgement. Sensations like warmth in the chest, relaxation of the shoulders, or a lifted gaze anchor the experience physically, reinforcing cognitive and emotional shifts. This integration of mind and body strengthens the neural patterns associated with appreciation, making the practice more automatic and profound over time. Gratitude rewires perspective by shifting the reference point from absence to presence. Instead of measuring life against what is missing, it cultivates recognition of what is functioning, available, and supportive. This perspective reduces envy, comparison, and dissatisfaction, which often consume attention and energy. By consistently focusing on the positive and acknowledging contributions, whether material, relational, or experiential, the mind begins to default to recognition rather than complaint. Over weeks and months, this shift produces measurable improvements in mood, motivation, and cognitive clarity. Structured rituals deepen the effect. Begin or end each day with a dedicated gratitude exercise. For instance, upon waking, reflect on 3 aspects of life that provide opportunity or comfort. Before sleep, recount moments of progress, connection, or learning. These anchor points act as mental bookends, framing the day with intentional attention to constructive elements. The repetition reinforces neural pathways associated with noticing, appreciating, and acting from a perspective of abundance rather than lack. Gradually, gratitude becomes a habitual lens rather than a sporadic practice. Gratitude intersects with goal attainment. By acknowledging existing resources, capabilities, and opportunities, individuals strengthen self-efficacy and motivation. Recognizing progress, even incremental, reinforces competence and encourages continuation of deliberate effort. Instead of becoming discouraged by what remains unachieved, the mind sees both achievement and potential. This balanced perspective nurtures perseverance, strategic planning, and proactive engagement. Gratitude does not replace ambition. It fortifies it by stabilizing emotional and cognitive resources. Eliminating comparison enhances the practice. Observing the success or possessions of others can often trigger envy or inadequacy, which neutralizes the benefits of gratitude. Instead, focus exclusively on personal context, strengths, accomplishments, support systems, and experiences. Anchor acknowledgement in lived reality rather than external benchmarks. This approach ensures that gratitude is authentic, actionable, and directly reinforcing of personal development rather than diluted by distraction or judgment. Self-referenced awareness deepens the internalization of positive patterns. Challenges can be reframed as inputs for gratitude. Consider the lessons hidden in setbacks, mistakes, or friction. Recognizing growth derived from adversity shifts perception from victimhood to empowerment. This cognitive transformation strengthens resilience, reinforces problem solving, and encourages constructive engagement with obstacles. Every challenge presents an opportunity to notice capability, adaptability, or wisdom gained. Consistent lens of gratitude integrates lessons and produces a mindset oriented toward learning, growth, and intentional action rather than complaint or stagnation. Long-term impact emerges through consistent, deliberate application. Daily gratitude practices alter default cognitive patterns, shaping attention to seek opportunities, value resources, and maintain emotional equilibrium. Neural pathways associated with positive attention, emotional regulation, and constructive thinking are reinforced, producing lasting changes in perception and behavior. Over time, gratitude becomes a foundational aspect of cognition, influencing decision-making, relationships, and personal growth. The mind trained in this way is less reactive, more solution-oriented, and more aligned with long-term objectives. Ultimately, practicing gratitude rewires perspective by teaching the mind to see life as a system of contributions rather than deficiencies. Attention shifts from scarcity to sufficiency, fear to appreciation, and limitation to possibility. Decisions are guided by clarity, emotion is tempered by acknowledgement, and energy is redirected toward growth and achievement. Gratitude is a discipline, a lens, and a strategy. It transforms perception, strengthens resilience, and fosters intentional living. The consistent cultivation of gratitude allows the individual to approach each day with focus, presence, and recognition of the abundant resources available, creating a life defined by insight, purpose, and enduring fulfillment. Number 8. Choose long-term thinking daily. Long-term thinking is the deliberate choice to prioritize actions, decisions, and habits that yield enduring benefits over fleeting gratification. Most people drift through life reacting to immediate impulses, desires, or pressures, allowing short-term convenience to dictate outcomes. This mindset fosters inconsistency, regret, and stagnation because the cumulative effects of daily choices are ignored. Choosing long-term thinking daily is a practice of discipline and foresight, transforming the trajectory of life by aligning present behavior with future goals. It is not a singular decision, but a series of consistent, conscious acts that compound over time into extraordinary results. The practice begins with clarity of vision, Without understanding the desired destination, it is impossible to measure the long-term value of any action. Define what success, fulfillment, and growth mean in tangible terms. Visualize the life you want to live in 5, 10, or 20 years. Break it down into specific, actionable outcomes: financial stability, physical health, intellectual mastery, meaningful relationships, or emotional resilience. This clarity allows the mind to evaluate daily choices through the lens of future impact, rather than immediate convenience. When each action is viewed as an investment in that vision, prioritization becomes natural and consistent. Daily decisions often seem inconsequential, yet they compound into the future. The small choice to study for 30 minutes instead of watching passive entertainment, to save a portion of income instead of impulsive spending, or to practice patience in conflict rather than react impulsively shapes long-term outcomes more than occasional grand gestures. Understanding that the aggregation of minor actions forms the foundation of success encourages accountability for everyday behavior. Long-term thinking requires attention to these incremental decisions, cultivating the awareness that nothing is truly small when compounded over time. Discipline is central to embedding long-term thinking. The human brain is wired to seek immediate reward, making consistent prioritization of delayed outcomes challenging. Discipline functions as the mechanism to bridge desire and action. Establish routines and rituals that favor future benefits. A morning schedule that includes planning, reflection, or skill building, deliberate time blocks for work that advances long-term objectives, and conscious allocation of energy toward relationships that foster growth. Discipline is not restrictive, but enabling, creating the structure necessary to align action with enduring goals. Trade-offs are an inevitable aspect of long-term thinking. Every choice involves opportunity cost, and recognizing these costs heightens awareness of the consequences of short-term indulgence. Saying no to distractions, instant gratification, or unaligned commitments requires courage and clarity. Each sacrifice is an investment in future capability. The individual who consistently opts for effort over ease, preparation over procrastination, and resilience over avoidance strengthens not only outcomes but character. Long-term thinking is inseparable from a mindset of strategic sacrifice. Visualization and mental rehearsal strengthen the practice. Envisioning both the long-term goals and the incremental steps required to reach them creates a mental roadmap. Consider the daily choices that cumulatively lead to these outcomes. Anticipate challenges, obstacles, and temptations, and mentally simulate responses that preserve alignment with long-term objectives. This rehearsal primes the mind to recognize opportunities and threats, making deliberate action more instinctive and minimizing reactive, short-sighted behaviors when faced with stress or uncertainty. Accountability mechanisms accelerate progress. Sharing long-term intentions with trusted individuals, mentors, or accountability partners creates external reinforcement of commitment. Periodic reflection on progress ensures alignment with intended trajectory. Documenting milestones, reviewing setbacks, and celebrating incremental gains cultivates awareness of cause and effect over time. This feedback loop strengthens both motivation and discipline, reinforcing the link between daily effort and long-term reward. The mind internalizes the consequences of choices, shifting from reactive behavior to proactive, goal-aligned action. Patience is an intrinsic companion to long-term thinking. Results rarely manifest immediately, and the temptation to abandon effort for short-term gratification is constant. Embracing the reality that meaningful progress accumulates gradually requires mental fortitude. Each day's actions are seeds planted, and the fruits may not be visible for months or years. Trust in the process, confidence in consistency, and acknowledgement of incremental improvement are essential to sustain momentum. Patience converts persistence into measurable outcomes, strengthening resilience and reinforcing commitment to future-oriented choices. Environment and context amplify or undermine long-term thinking. Surrounding oneself with individuals, media, and stimuli that prioritize immediacy, distraction, or consumption erodes foresight. Conversely, environments that model patience, planning, and deliberate action cultivate a mindset attuned to future payoff. Arranged spaces, schedules, and social interactions to encourage strategic behavior and minimize exposure to short-term enticement. The external environment becomes a silent partner in reinforcing the habit of forward-looking action, reducing reliance solely on willpower. Reflection and self-assessment refine practice. Daily or weekly contemplation of decisions, behaviors, and outcomes highlights patterns of alignment or deviation from long-term goals. Analyze moments when short-term impulses dominated and identify strategies to adjust future behavior. This reflective practice transforms experience into intelligence, creating a feedback loop that accelerates learning and strengthens foresight. The combination of reflection, planning, and adjustment ensures that long-term thinking evolves dynamically, adapting to changing circumstances while preserving strategic alignment. Integrating long-term thinking into emotional and cognitive frameworks enhances decision-making. Emotions can bias perception toward immediate satisfaction or avoidance of discomfort. By consistently framing situations in terms of long-term consequences, emotional influence is moderated and deliberate, rational action is reinforced. For example, resisting the urge to engage in conflict with harsh words preserves relationships and reputation over time. Similarly, delaying immediate consumption in favor of saving or investing cultivates security and opportunity. Long-term thinking structures emotion and cognition toward enduring gain rather than transient relief. Habits are the vehicle of long-term thinking. Repetition of behaviors that align with future objectives ensures that the practice becomes instinctive rather than dependent on conscious deliberation. Incremental accumulation of productive habits, consistent study, exercise, saving, reflection, and networking forms the infrastructure of long-term success. These behaviors, once ingrained, operate automatically, reducing the cognitive load required for daily decisions. Habits transform abstract foresight into tangible, actionable routines that steadily shape outcomes over months and years. Resilience is cultivated alongside long-term thinking. Life's unpredictability tests patience, strategy, and commitment. Maintaining focus on enduring goals amid setbacks, failures, or uncertainty strengthens character and fortifies resolve. Long-term thinkers learn to interpret obstacles as opportunities for growth rather than deterrents. Each challenge is an occasion to exercise strategic choice, adapt plans, and reinforce consistency. Resilience and foresight operate synergistically, enabling sustained progress even in the face of adversity. Perspective is shifted through repeated commitment to long-term thinking. The mind gradually prioritizes what matters most, filters distractions, and evaluates decisions based on cumulative consequences rather than immediate reward. This orientation reduces reactive, impulsive behavior and cultivates a measured, deliberate approach to life. Daily choices, viewed in the context of weeks, months, or years, acquire significance beyond their immediate appearance. The individual develops foresight, judgment, and confidence in navigating complexity. Long-term thinking is transformative because it converts the ordinary into extraordinary through compounding effects. Small disciplined choices made consistently over time generate outcomes that appear disproportionate to the effort expended in the moment. Financial stability, intellectual mastery, physical conditioning, and strong relationships emerge from repeated attention to decisions aligned with enduring goals. The practice shifts life from being a series of reactive moments to a deliberate, strategic progression toward meaningful achievement. Ultimately, choosing long-term thinking daily is the deliberate cultivation of foresight, discipline, and strategic action. It requires awareness, patience, reflection, environmental design, and consistent practice. The decisions made today shape identity, capability, and opportunity tomorrow. By prioritizing enduring benefits over fleeting impulses, the individual gradually constructs a life defined by clarity, resilience, and purpose. Each choice compounds, each action reinforces vision, and over time, the habitual commitment to long-term thinking transforms potential into reality, producing results that are substantial, meaningful, and enduring. Number 9. Speak to yourself with authority. The way you speak to yourself shapes the very structure of your thoughts, beliefs, and actions. Internal dialogue is the foundation upon which habits, decisions, and emotional resilience are built. Most people allow their inner voice to wander unchecked, repeating doubts, fears, and self-criticism. This unmonitored chatter reinforces limitations, erodes confidence, and perpetuates cycles of hesitation and regret. Speaking to yourself with authority is not arrogance. It is the disciplined practice of directing thought, reinforcing competence, and cultivating self-trust. It transforms internal dialogue from a reactive, chaotic force into a strategic tool for growth, clarity, and deliberate action. The practice begins with awareness of existing self-talk. Observe the tone, content, and frequency of thoughts throughout the day. Identify patterns that undermine progress, such as negative assumptions, self-judgment, or catastrophizing. Many of these messages are subtle, appearing as fleeting phrases or unconscious evaluations. I can't do this, I'm not ready, or I always fail. Recognizing these impulses without judgment allows conscious intervention. The first step toward authoritative self-talk is acknowledging the power of words and understanding that they are not passive reflections, but active creators of mindset and behavior. Once awareness is established, deliberate language replaces passive thought patterns. Authority in self-talk requires precision, clarity, and intentionality. Avoid vague or wishful statements like "I hope I can handle this," which signal uncertainty. Instead, phrase directives in definitive, actionable terms. "I will complete this task with focus," or "I am capable of navigating this challenge effectively." The language chosen internally carries weight, reinforcing neural pathways associated with confidence, decisiveness, and competence. Authority emerges not from force but from clarity, specificity, and alignment with values and objectives. Consistency is crucial. Speaking to oneself with authority is a daily, continuous practice. Authority must become the default tone of internal dialogue, not an occasional adjustment in moments of crisis. Establish rituals that reinforce commanding self-talk. Morning affirmations rooted in actionable goals, deliberate reflection during transitions, and end-of-day acknowledgments of progress. Over time, these repeated patterns create habitual neural pathways, shifting the mind from default self-doubt to a baseline of confidence and proactive engagement. The brain internalizes the expectation of competence, influencing both thought and action automatically. Emotional integration strengthens the practice. Authority is not imposed through suppression or denial of emotion, but through balanced acknowledgement and strategic direction. Recognize feelings of fear, frustration, or anxiety without allowing them to dominate thought. Use authoritative self-talk to provide structure and guidance. "I notice the anxiety, I will focus on what I can control," or "this frustration signals a challenge I am equipped to manage." By validating emotion while maintaining direction, internal dialogue becomes a tool for guidance rather than a source of disruption, enhancing resilience and adaptive capacity. Visualization reinforces authoritative self-talk. Pair clear, assertive language with mental imagery of successful action. Imagine navigating the task at hand with competence, composure, and effectiveness. See the steps, the decisions, and the outcome achieved. This combination of language and imagery solidifies confidence and prepares the mind for real-world execution. Mental rehearsal aligns cognitive, emotional, and behavioral pathways, reducing hesitation and strengthening the sense of agency. Authority becomes not just internal speech, but embodied expectation of effective performance. Accountability mechanisms amplify impact. Sharing intentions or reflections with trusted mentors, peers, or partners provides external reinforcement of internal authority. External acknowledgement complements internal dialogue, confirming competence and progress. Recording reflections, reviewing achievements, and setting measurable milestones further anchors the practice in observable reality. Authority in self-talk is both a cognitive and behavioral phenomenon, strengthened by feedback loops that integrate perception, action, and reinforcement. Intentional correction of negative self-talk is essential. Authority requires immediate recognition and reframing of undermining thoughts. When self-doubt arises, respond with clear, directive statements that restore alignment with goals. "I am learning, and this challenge is an opportunity," or "mistakes provide feedback. I will adjust and continue." Repetition of corrective internal dialogue strengthens the ability to override impulsive, destructive thought patterns. Over time, the mind defaults to proactive guidance rather than reactive self-criticism. Language shapes not only thought, but behavior. Using commanding, precise words internally influences decision-making, initiative, and persistence. Statements like, "I choose to act decisively," or "I focus on solutions, not problems," translate into tangible behaviors that reinforce authority. The internal voice becomes a coach, strategist, and motivator simultaneously. Authority in speech, even if initially practiced silently, manifests externally through confidence, clarity, and consistency of action. Words internalized repeatedly define habits and identity. Boundary setting is a natural consequence. Authority in self-talk fosters discernment in external engagement. When the internal voice commands respect for priorities and values, it reinforces decision-making aligned with long-term objectives. Unnecessary commitments, distractions, or interactions that undermine purpose are less likely to disrupt focus. By cultivating an assertive inner voice, individuals protect attention, energy, and intention, reinforcing both mental and emotional autonomy. Boundaries, once internalized, translate into practical, observable behaviors that strengthen alignment with growth-oriented action. The practice of gratitude can intersect with authoritative self-talk. Recognizing existing strengths, resources, and opportunities reinforces statements of competence and direction. Statements like, "I have the tools and skills to succeed," combine acknowledgement of assets with purposeful language, enhancing confidence and focus. Authority is magnified when grounded in reality rather than wishful thinking. Recognition of capability paired with directive language produces a mind oriented toward constructive action rather than doubt or hesitation. Continuous reflection enhances skill. Evaluate the efficacy of internal dialogue by observing behavior, outcomes, and emotional states. Identify moments where authoritative self-talk influenced action successfully, and moments where reactive or negative thoughts dominated. Adjust language, tone, and structure to reinforce alignment with goals and resilience. The mind becomes a laboratory of experimentation, integrating feedback to refine clarity, confidence, and effectiveness. This iterative process ensures that authority and self-talk evolves and strengthens over time, producing lasting influence on thought and behavior. Integration with long-term thinking magnifies results. Authoritative internal speech is a tool for navigating both immediate challenges and future objectives. By framing internal dialogue around enduring goals, the mind prioritizes actions that compound over time. Decisions are evaluated not only by immediate convenience, but by alignment with desired outcomes, creating coherence between thought, action, and aspiration. Authority in self-talk is thus both a stabilizing and directing force, ensuring that energy is applied efficiently and purposefully. Over time, speaking to oneself with authority rewires self-perception. Confidence, decisiveness, and resilience emerge naturally as the internal voice consistently reinforces competence and capability. Hesitation diminishes, self-trust deepens, and challenges are approached with strategic composure rather than reactive anxiety. The mind shifts from passive observer to proactive architect, directing attention, energy, and behavior toward meaningful outcomes. Identity itself becomes aligned with mastery, intention, and self-directed action. Ultimately, speaking to oneself with authority transforms both thought and life. Internal dialogue shapes perception, informs decision-making, and dictates behavior. By cultivating clarity, precision, and consistency in self-talk, the mind becomes a tool of guidance rather than a source of limitation. Emotion, cognition, and action align, producing resilience, focus, and competence. Each thought is deliberate, each statement reinforces capacity, and each action reflects the authority cultivated within. Mastery over internal language creates mastery over behavior, circumstances, and ultimately life itself. Number 10. Act before motivation appears. Action is the catalyst that transforms intention into reality, and waiting for motivation to strike is one of the most common traps that prevents progress. Motivation is fleeting, unpredictable, and often unreliable. Relying on it alone ensures inconsistency, procrastination, and stagnation. The practice of acting before motivation appears is rooted in discipline, foresight, and deliberate choice. It recognizes that behavior creates momentum, confidence, and clarity rather than the other way around. Action precedes motivation. Action generates energy, cultivates momentum, and rewires the mind to embrace consistent, purposeful effort. The first step in this practice is understanding that waiting for inspiration is illusory. Motivation is an emotional response, and emotions are not constants. They ebb and flow depending on circumstances, fatigue, or external influence. Waiting for the perfect moment or feeling to arrive often leads to delay, indecision, or abandonment of goals. A mindset anchored in action acknowledges that progress is built on deliberate steps taken consistently, even when enthusiasm is absent. By acting first, the brain begins to associate effort with accomplishment, creating an internal feedback loop that generates motivation organically, rather than passively awaiting it. Routine and structure are critical tools in this approach. Establishing habitual behaviors removes dependence on fluctuating motivation. For example, setting fixed times for exercise, skill practice, focused work, or personal development ensures consistency, regardless of emotional state. The body and mind become conditioned to act automatically, bypassing the need for subjective enthusiasm. Repetition reinforces neural pathways that link action to accomplishment, gradually transforming effort into a natural, almost instinctive response. Discipline, rather than fleeting emotion, becomes the engine of progress. Breaking tasks into manageable steps enhances the ability to act without waiting for motivation. Large, overwhelming objectives often paralyze as the mind anticipates difficulty or discomfort. By fragmenting these tasks into smaller, achievable actions, the barrier to initiation diminishes. Even starting with a simple, concrete step, writing a single paragraph, walking for 5 minutes, or preparing materials, creates a sense of momentum that propels further effort. Momentum becomes the substitute for motivation, providing energy and direction where emotion alone might fail. The principle of immediate execution is vital. Once a decision to act is made, delay undermines both discipline and momentum. The mind is prone to rationalizations, excuses, or distractions when time is allowed between intention and action. By acting instantly, even in small ways, inertia is overcome and neural reinforcement occurs. Each completed action strengthens the association between initiative and accomplishment, training the mind to move from intention to execution without relying on fluctuating feelings of readiness. Environmental design amplifies the practice. Reduce friction for desired actions and increase friction for distractions. For instance, keeping exercise equipment visible and accessible, organizing workspaces for immediate productivity, and removing triggers for procrastination create conditions where action is easier than inaction. The environment functions as a silent partner, nudging behavior toward momentum and reducing dependence on emotional arousal. By engineering surroundings that support action, the brain is guided naturally toward effort even when motivation is absent. Accountability mechanisms further reinforce early action. Sharing intentions with peers, mentors, or support networks creates external pressure to act consistently. Scheduled check-ins, public declarations of commitment, or measurable reporting instill a sense of responsibility that compels execution, independent of internal desire. Social reinforcement complements internal discipline, ensuring that tasks are completed despite fluctuating motivation. Accountability turns intention into concrete progress and strengthens the internalization of the action-first mindset. Visualization and mental priming accelerate initiation. Before starting a task, mentally rehearse the steps, challenges, and successful completion. Anticipate resistance and rehearse the choice to act. Despite this, mental simulation reduces hesitation, clarifies priorities, and prepares the mind to move from contemplation to execution. By combining visualization with immediate action, the brain links planning with behavior, making subsequent steps smoother and reinforcing the belief that effort precedes emotional readiness. The practice of self-talk complements action initiation. Replace hesitation or doubt with authoritative directive statements. I begin now. This step moves me forward. Or I act because it matters. Language internally spoken, with clarity and authority, conditions the mind to accept effort as normal, expected, and effective. Self-talk provides the internal push that substitutes for absent enthusiasm, reinforcing discipline, confidence, and focus. Words become catalysts, transforming intention into observable action, and further solidifying the habit of proactive engagement. Incremental progress compounds rapidly. Acting before motivation creates small wins, which feed confidence and build energy for subsequent tasks. Each step completed reinforces the sense of capability, making future action easier and more consistent. Motivation often emerges as a byproduct of effort. The satisfaction, momentum, and sense of control generated through action naturally cultivate emotional reinforcement. This inversion, acting first, feeling motivated second, redefines the relationship between effort and inspiration, making progress reliable rather than contingent on ephemeral feelings. Discomfort is embraced as a signal, not a deterrent. Tasks often feel unpleasant or challenging in the absence of motivation, but discomfort is a natural indication of growth and boundary expansion. Acting despite resistance rewires the mind to associate effort with opportunity rather than avoidance. This approach strengthens resilience, reduces fear of challenge, and conditions the brain to seek forward motion even when initial desire is absent. The act of engagement, especially under resistance, produces mastery and self-trust. Reflection enhances the practice by consolidating lessons learned. Review actions taken, outcomes achieved, and obstacles encountered. Celebrate completion rather than focusing on difficulty or discomfort. Assess what strategies enabled initiation despite lack of motivation and refine approaches for future application. Reflection turns action into insight, reinforcing the mental pathways that connect deliberate effort with meaningful results. This cyclical process strengthens both capability and confidence, creating a self-sustaining system where action begets momentum, which begets motivation, which begets further action. Integration with long-term objectives magnifies impact. Every action, however small, contributes to cumulative growth when aligned with enduring goals. Immediate execution ensures that effort is consistently applied, compounding over time into skill, knowledge, health, or achievement. Waiting for motivation often delays or forfeits these incremental gains, whereas disciplined action secures progress and accelerates results. The focus shifts from feeling ready to producing outcomes, which ultimately drives both competence and confidence. Over time, acting before motivation becomes habitual. The mind internalizes the principle that effort is independent of emotion and that progress is a function of deliberate choice rather than waiting for inspiration. Procrastination diminishes, resilience grows, and the ability to initiate challenging tasks strengthens. The habit forms a feedback loop where action generates momentum, which in turn cultivates motivation, creating a consistent cycle of productive engagement that sustains both short-term achievement and long-term development. Ultimately, acting before motivation appears transforms the relationship between intention, effort, and results. Motivation is no longer a prerequisite but a consequence of consistent, disciplined action. The mind and body learn to initiate effort autonomously, sustaining momentum, building skill, and reinforcing self-trust. Challenges are met with deliberate engagement rather than hesitation. Life becomes a series of intentional steps rather than reactive wait. By committing to action first, the individual generates the conditions for sustained progress, resilience, and success, creating a life defined by consistent achievement, mastery, and unwavering momentum.